In a previous video, I looked at error checking in Excel and validating user inputs into a workbook. But if your workbook has more fundamental problems of errors in the formulas themselves, you need to get familiar with Excel's formula auditing toolbar. Let's dive in and take a look. I've set up a simple worksheet where the contents of every cell with a value in should be the product of the two cells above it. But as you can see here, we've already got some errors showing up. The first thing to point out is that Excel has error checking rules. If a cell value triggers one of those checking rules, you'll see the small green mark in the cell and the warning sign showing against it. Now, if we click the drop down on the warning sign, you can see here that this is a propagated error, which means that it's not that cell on its own that's causing the problem, but it is referring to another cell that has an error in it. Now, to view these error checking rules, you can either look at the Formulas tab in Excel's options by going through the File menu, or you can jump straight there by just choosing error checking options on this drop down menu. Here we see the error checking rules which are turned on. The only one that's turned off at the moment is formulas referring to empty cells. So all these other rules will trigger the green marker that you see in the corner of the cells. Now, if you didn't want to have this useful feature turned on, you can choose to untick this box here, enable background error checking, which will turn that feature off. And it's an Excel-wide function. It won't just be for this workbook. You also have the option to change the color of the marker. And if you've chosen to ignore any errors in the workbook, you can reset that and re-trigger those errors. Going back to the workbook, we can look at all these green markers and work out where the error is coming from. So again, that's a propagated error. That's a propagated error. This one is saying that it could not convert A to a number. This is the source error that is trickling down. So it's trying to multiply 5 by A, which of course is causing an error. A more visual way of seeing the trickle-down effect of such an error is to use the Formula Auditing toolbar, which you can see in the Formulas tab of Excel. If I click the bottommost error and then in the Formula Auditing toolbar use Trace Precedents, which will show arrows that indicate the cells affecting the value of the current selected cell. So here we can see the values coming into that formula. Now the blue arrow means that that value is okay. The red arrow means that there is an error pulling into the formula. If we hit Trace Precedents again, it will cascade down those arrows. And here on the right hand side, we can see the error that we'd already identified of multiplying 5 by A is where the error starts, which then trickles down. We can remove such arrows from the workbook by clicking the Remove Arrows button on the tab. Here I'm going to remove all, and on this source error I'm going to click Trace Dependence. So we're viewing this the other way. We're seeing the trickle down effect rather than the trickle up. You can see that value is going all the way down to F19. If I go back to the source error and reinstate the dependent arrows, one useful thing you can do is click the arrow to move between the source and target values. If I start here from F19, I can double click the arrow to go to E16, double click the arrow to go to 13, and then double click to go back to the source error. This is useful if the cells that are being referred to are spread about a worksheet and not all visible on the screen, as we can see here. So clicking it would take you directly to a cell that could be way off to one side from the formula that you're looking at. Another feature of Trace Precedents and Dependents, if I remove the arrows, is this keyboard shortcut that is shown of Control and the open square bracket and Control and the closed square bracket. I go to this formula here, I can use Control and the open square bracket to go back to the previous layer of cells that are referenced. I can go back further. You can see that the formula eventually refer to all the cells on the bottom row. And Control and the right square bracket will allow me to step back. Selecting a cell with a formula in, we can use the Evaluate Formula option in the Formula Auditing toolbar. So here we can see that cell F19 has the equation E16 times G16. So we can evaluate both sides of that formula by clicking the evaluate button. You can see that it's the right hand side in G16 that is causing the problem. It's 360 times an error, which gives us the error. What can be more useful is going to the evaluate formula and actually stepping through the formula. So in this instance, E16, we can step in and see what makes up E16. And then D13 is underscored, so stepping in, we can see what makes up D13. And we can keep stepping down until we get to the bottom value where there are no further formula. So if we step out, Excel will evaluate each of those steps as we step back out. So if we go down the other side of the formula in this instance, let's go to H13 where we know there's an error. We can see that we've got a value error. Stepping out, we come back to the same result. So we can step up and down through the formula to see what's impacting each of the formulas at each level. Excel gives us the option to show the formulas in each cell rather than just the values that those formulas return. To do that, you can click the Show Formulas button in the Formula Auditing toolbar or use the keyboard shortcut Control and Backtick. Here you can see by clicking it, it's showing the formulas that are in those cells. This is useful to show that some of the cells don't have formulas in, but actually have hard-coded values, which in themselves could be the cause of problems in your workbook. To go back to the formula, you just unclick Show Formulas or use the Control and Backtick keyboard shortcut again. The error checking button in the formula auditing toolbar has a drop down with a few options to help you identify errors in your workbook. With this bottom cell F19 highlighted, I'll just choose the drop down Trace Error, which is similar to using the trace precedent and dependent arrows. But in this instance, it actually goes back and does the steps for you to show where the error is coming from. I remove those arrows and go back to cell F19 and go into the error checking option. This brings up a requester that allows us to go through by using previous and next all the errors that are on this worksheet. So you can see by pressing next, it's stepping through the errors until it's done all of them. If we go back and have a look again, you can see here that it's telling us the information that we've seen on the warning drop down for cell errors before. So this is a propagated error. We can ask for help on this error. We could trace the error, which will put the arrows in that we've just seen. We could choose to ignore the error, which again is an option on the warning sign drop down that you see on a cell with an error in it. Or we can even choose to go in and edit the formula in the formula bar at the top of the screen here. By clicking options, this simply brings you into the Excel option so you can check what is being classed as an error in terms of the error checking rules. Again, this just allows you to step through. So if we're in I10, we can see here, this is the cause of our trickle down error where it couldn't convert the letter A to a number. When building a workbook, you may inadvertently create circular references within your formula, whereby a formula either directly or indirectly refers back to the cell that the formula is in. So how do you track these down? Well, using the error checking drop down, we have a circular references option, and this is showing in this instance that we have circular references in the workbook. Now, for the sake of the example, they're all on this sheet. So I can see here that F19, which is our bottom cell of the sheet, is part of that circular reference. If I click on that, and then I can use the Trace Precedents button to track back through that to see what's happening here. And here's the problem. You can see this reference between H7 and F19. So effectively, this formula is trying to multiply values all the way up this side and including this cell, but then this cell is referring back to that. So you would have to resolve that circular reference to get rid of the problem. If I remove the arrows and change that to a hard-coded number, for example, and go back to circular references, you can see it's grayed out, which means we no longer have any circular references within the workbook. The formula auditing toolbar also contains the watch window option. Now here we have two formulas that are driven by a hard-coded value that is not visible on the sheet. So what if we wanted to change the value of the hard-coded cell and see what the effect on the formulas is? So let's open the watch window and we can add a watch on cell C4 and C6. The watch window tells you the book that watch cell is in, the sheet, the name if the cell has a name, the cell reference and the value, as well as the formula that is in each of those cells. So if we now move over to the hard-coded value, you can see that we can still see everything in the watch window. At the moment, the hard-coded value is 10, which is giving us a value in C4 of 50 and C6 of 500. But if we change that to an 8, we can see the effect it has on changing those values. Now, the watch window does give you a lot of information that could be useful when tracking errors through workbooks or monitoring the effect on cells. What if you just wanted to see the output of those cells? There is a different way to do that. So let's delete the watches and close that down. And what we'll do is we'll go back to the cells here and we'll highlight them and we'll copy. And over here, we'll just go to the Home tab and paste them as a linked picture. So this isn't a static image of those cells. It's a linked back image to the live value of those cells. So if we change the value that they're based on, we can see that the image updates. That can be quite useful and a different way of doing the same function. The option to paste a linked image doesn't exist in older versions of Excel. So if you don't have that option, you can add the camera button to your quick access toolbar or to your ribbon, which will allow you to do a similar pasting of a dynamic image. And there you go, that's the formula auditing toolbar, a pretty powerful toolkit to help you identify and rectify errors in your workbooks. If you haven't already, please check out my previous video on validating user inputs in Excel. And if you like this type of content, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to get notified when new videos are released. Thanks for watching.